morning, ladies and gentlemen. Very pleased to present to you Maynard Shirley, who is a Franciscan brother, a member of the Navajo Nation, which, as far as I can tell, is the largest nation of Native Americans in the whole United States. That's quite a success story, because Kit Carson had other things in mind. So without further ado, Maynard, it's a blessing that you can come today.
Thank you. Thank you very much for allowing me to stand before you and give you a small introduction about cultural spirituality. And since I'm a member of the Navajo tribe, a lot of the things that I will say or present to you will be coming from my own cultural background. And I feel that's appropriate because I really don't have any other business to talk about other people's spirituality when I wasn't raised in it or don't know a whole lot about it. So everything that I'm going to present to you will be from my own spirituality. And along with that, I also have another spirituality, and that is I am a Franciscan friar with the Catholic Church. So actually, I have two spirituality, my own Navajo way, and I also call it Franciscan way. For the Navajo person, spirituality is always defined as the way, and which I find really interesting because when we speak of spirituality in the Catholic sense, it's always walking on the path, which to me is defined as the way. But before I go into my presentation, let me give you a brief history about myself, so at least you know who's standing here and saying things to you. As a brother pointed out, my name is Maynard Shirley, and I grew up on the Navajo reservation all my life until at the age of 29. And that's when I decided to enter a second career, and that is to join the Franciscan order. My place of birth is in Rehoboth, New Mexico, which is probably like about a mile west of Gallup, New Mexico. And that was the only hospital on the Navajo reservation in 1956. And according to my mother, she only spent $65 on me to be to come into this world. And so now, if you're going to have a child, I'm sure it doesn't cost $65 anymore. So she was real proud of it that she was able to pay $65. And my father is deceased. He's been dead for about 23 years. And so it's only my mother that kind of raised all five of us. I'm the oldest in the family, and I have another brother. He's a year younger than me, and three sisters. And we range from 39 to 31, and all five of us. And I think my mother did a very good job. And so she was a mother and a father to all of us when my father passed away. And I have to, when I talk about spirituality, I have to mention my grandparents on both sides of the family, my maternal and paternal grandparents, because they had a lot to do with my Indian spirituality and also with my Catholic spirituality. And growing up, I always tell people that I had both traditions growing up. My father's side of the family were always very Catholic. And so when we had family get-togethers, everything was always Catholic. There was always a mass, and there was always a prayer, there was rosaries, and all the things that goes along with being a Catholic. And then on my mom's side of the family, they were very traditional. And so I attended a lot of Indian ceremonies, learned how to pray in the Indian way, and use all the Indian things that you need to be to pray in the Indian way. And so growing up, I have both. And the way I usually define my spirituality is it's like carrying two sticks. One represents the Navajo way, one represents the Catholic way. And for me, what I did was I combined the two together. And the person that combined the two together for me is Christ. He tied the two together for me. And so now, instead of having two sticks in my hand, I have one stick in my hand, my Indian way and my Catholic way. And so that's the way I live my life today. And I see no difficulty for myself to be a Navajo Indian and also to be Franciscan, for me personally, because that's the way I was brought up. And so I really have to thank my grandparents and my mother for teaching me both ways, and to see the values on both sides, and to say they're both very important for me. Where when I did join the Franciscan, I didn't have to make a choice and say, okay, now that I'm joining the order, I have to put one aside and only take one. And that was never the case for me. For me, it was I can bring both of them into the order and into the church and make that part of my life. And if I was given a choice, I think it would have been very difficult for me to give up my Indian way, because if I did, that would be like chopping off your arm and throw it away and say that part is no good. And so for me, when I joined the order, the Franciscan embraced everything that was with me, and that including my spirituality. And I know this probably wouldn't make a whole lot of sense to you, but if you were a Navajo audience, we always begin by introducing ourselves, the place where you're from, and then you also mention your clan. And for me, my mother's clan is where two waters flow together, or in the Navajo way, it's Toigatlini. And then secondly, mention your father's clan. And for my father's side of the clan is the Zuni clan. And then after that, you mention your maternal grandfather, because your grandmother's clan is passed on through your mother, so there's no need to identify your grandmother. But your grandfather will always be a different clan. And so my maternal grandfather's clan is Okin, which is the Zia clan. And on my paternal side of the family, grandfather is Tsenchikinen, which is a cliff dweller clan. So as you can see, there's a lot of Pueblo influences just by the fact of the clan. So I always say, I introduce myself as a Navajo, but in reality, I'm probably a lot more Pueblo than Navajo. And so that's the kind of a person I am. And I joined the order in 1986, and as a candidate, and I did my 1 year, or less than a year, over at Pina Blanca, which is not too far from here. And after I completed my pre-novitiate, I was accepted to the novitiate in St. Michael's, Arizona, which is on the Navajo Reservation near Winter Rock, Arizona. And I was there for 1 year and 1 day. And then after I completed, I call it the boot camp. Yeah. That's basically what it was. But it was a good learning experience. And after I completed my novitiate, I was allowed to go on into post-novitiate, which lasted for 3 years. And that was up in Denver, Colorado. And that really was my very, very first time being off the Navajo Reservation and being that far away from my family. So for me, it was quite an experience for me to be away from my family. And by the time I was completing my post-novitiate, I was down to 127 pounds. And so the order said, there's something wrong with this puppy here, so we better send him back home. And so they sent me home for about 3 or 4 months to recuperate. And then in 1992, I made my solemn profession at Fort Defiance, Arizona, which is still on the Navajo Reservation. And it's still near Winter Rock. It's like about 6 miles northwest of Winter Rock. And so I've been solemn professed for going on 3 years now. And so in total, from the beginning to solemn profession, I've been in the order for about 6 years. And that's my journey as a Franciscan and also as a Navajo person. And my talk is on culture, spirituality, or I just looking at, I didn't realize that they made my picture on that little piece of paper. So I'm going to talk about Indian spirituality or Navajo spirituality. And today, just from my observation, it seems like everybody is searching for some type of spirituality. And there's all kinds kinds of books out there that tells you how to find spirituality, the how-to book. And those are good books. I think some of them are good books because it leads you in the right direction or helps you to find the spirituality that you're looking for. And there's workshops in spirituality, like this place is a good place. And then there's people that are going out and seeking other people, according to them, that has the wisdom of spirituality. And so there's a real need for people searching for spirituality. And because of that, I think there's a real sudden interest in Indian spirituality. And I find a lot of non-Indians really gravitating toward Indian spirituality. And for me, I always find it real interesting because here's a group of people that were oppressed and persecuted by the church and by the government, and then now all of a sudden they're turning to us to help them define spirituality. And from my own perspective, I think there's a reason for it. And I think one reason that I think that's why there's a real sudden interest in Indian spirituality is because people are looking for the sense of sacredness. I think people have lost the sacredness of their own life. And I can reflect back on my own life as a young boy, where there was lots of things that we used to do, now we don't do anymore, even as an Indian people. And so even for us, we have lost a lot of that sacredness in our own culture. But we're still holding on to certain aspects of it. And I think that's the thing that non-Indians are starting to see, and there's a lot of value in there. And along with the sense of spirituality, I think there's also the identity crisis. Because if you lose your spirituality, I think you also lose your identity. And that's kind of the way I look at it. If you can't find yourself, and then you don't have no identity. And so for the Indian people, spirituality and identity are really tied together. If you're not a spiritual person, and then you have no identity, and you don't know who you are, and if you don't know who you are, you don't know where you're going. And so practically you say you're a lost person. And that's what my grandfather used to tell me when I was growing up on the reservation. And as a little kid, around like about 5 or 6 years old, I remember my grandmother waking us up real early in the morning at 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning. And when you're a little kid, you don't understand a lot of things that the older people tell you. And they used to get us up and say, go outside, go say your prayer, here's your cornmeal, do this. And when you're 5 or 6 years old, I mean, it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. It's just a lot of routine and something you must do. But now, as an older person, somebody that's 39 years old, I can reflect back and I can say, okay, now I know what the whole purpose was for, of my grandparents waking me up at 5 or 6 o'clock in the morning. But when you're at that age, a lot of things don't make any sense. And I'm sure every one of you can say the same thing too, If you reflect back, some of the things that your parents probably told you, it was like, well, it doesn't mean anything to me. But now as an old person, there's some values and there's some meaning and all that. And so because of that, I think it was a preparation for me to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning and to pray. Because as a Franciscan friar, I think you can't really be a Franciscan or even a religious person without prayer. Because without prayer, you have no identity. And then without your identity, you're a lost person. And along with that, with prayer gives you your source of strength, not only for your mind, but also for your body, and also for your emotion. In other words, the whole being. Every part of you needs prayer. There's a real hunger for it. Your body, just like if you don't feed yourself, your body begins to say, feed me, I'm hungry. I need food in order to live, in order to breathe, in order to see, in order to think. And with prayer, I think it's the same way too. Without prayer, your body starts to break down. And in that breakdown system, you start to collapse, and then after a while, you're not even a living being anymore. You're practically dead. And so spirituality, in a sense, gives you nourishment. It's food for your body, food for your mind, and food for your soul. And it takes care of the whole person. And for the Indian person to pray, prayer is not only for yourself, but it's also for the people that you live with, and for the whole world, and not only for human beings, but also for the plants, the mountains, the waters, and the animals. Because there's a lot of interaction and a lot of interdependence between our world and the plant world and the animal world and the water world, so to speak. If we were to die off, the plants and the animals will continue to live. But if the plants and the animals were to all die off, we will also die off too. So we're really dependent on these other living beings. In the Navajo, where we always define the plants and the animals as living beings. And so because of that, there's a lot of respect for animals and a lot of respect for plants. And so if we ever want to use any of the animals or plants, there's usually a prayer that's attached with it, and to explain to the animals and to the plants that we're taking your life in order that we may live. And so there's always that explanation of why we're taking another life, so that way we in return can also have life. And let me just give you some examples of one spirituality. I'm talking about, how everything around us has a lot of spirituality significance for a Navajo person. The environment has a lot to do how we approach the world and how we approach our spirituality. In the Navajo way, everything has meaning. The ground that we walk on, the air that we breathe, the people that we live with, the house that we live in, the animals that are here with us, and the plants. Every one of them has meaning to a Navajo person. They're not just another plant or another house, but it has a real deep spiritual meaning. And one example is every time I go up to the Sandia Mountain, which I know there's a lot of, I think there's a ski resort up there and lots of hiking trails and so forth. And there's picnic tables, and I was just up there last week. And I just noticed that a lot of people just run up there, look down on the city of Albuquerque, and then run back down and eat, and then that's it. It's just an outing. And I'm not saying that's bad, but I think for a Navajo person, there's a lot of spirituality attached to that, even just to go up the mountain. And anytime that I go up the mountain, either with my family especially, it's a time for prayer and also a time for a pilgrimage. It's a time where you go up the mountain to pray, to have good thoughts, to have holy thoughts, not only about yourself, both the people you're with and also for the world, and then also for all the animals and the plants that are on that mountain. So the way we begin is at the base of the mountain, there's a little prayer set. And with the Navajo people, we always carry a little pouch. We call it the corn hull bag. I didn't bring mine this morning. My mother probably upset with me because that's supposed to go with you everywhere you go. You always get that out, and in that little pouch there's corn pollen, and there's some animals. Most of the time it's a horse or a cow or a sheep, or all three of them. And there may sometimes be an arrowhead in there. And the only time the corn pollen bag is made is during an Indian ceremony. and that's the only time it's made. So even for myself, I couldn't make one, outside a ceremony. And that is only made for you and for your use. And the corn pollen bag represents your mind. And so it's treated with a lot of respect. And the way it was explained to me was, you carry it like it was an infant. You love it, and you give it warmth, and you caress it, and you love that thing. If you throw it around and mistreat it, that tells you you have no respect for yourself at all. And that's the way my mother explained to me. And so because of the corn pollen, there's a lot of spirituality attached to it. And the way you treat your corn pollen bag usually also tells you in what state of your spirituality life it's in. If you mistreat that, then it means your spirituality life is probably not in order. There's a lot of chaos and confusion. And if the older people see that, and then they will point that out to you. They say, the way you treat the corn pollen bag means that's also the way you treat yourself. And then it also tells a lot about your spiritual life. And let's get back to our little pilgrimage up
Can I
there.
ask you a question?
Yes.
Is that the same as a medicine bag in other terms?
I can't hear it, I'm sorry.
Yes, yeah. It could be defined, I've heard it being defined as a medicine bag too, yeah. But it could be used for a different purpose depending on the tribe. Maybe it doesn't have cornmeal, but it might have other, maybe sage or something like that, yeah.
Is it appropriate for a non-Indian person, for example, I go to a great many Native American Indian ceremonies, and there's always corn pollen in the shrine around the santos, the patron saint of the village, and everybody's taking the corn and putting it on the santos. And sometimes it's always a bowl of it in the house is my fireplace.
Yeah.
But would it be appropriate for me to use a little bit of corn pollen, or healing of some kind, or to put it on the santo?
Yeah, I think that would depend on the household that you're in. I'm not Pueblo myself, but I do know a lot of people from different Pueblos, and sometimes if they invite me, I'll use cornmeal, or just kind of use body languages, like if they look at you like they want you to do it, then you get up and do it. If not, then don't do it. That's usually how I approach different spirituality. If people invite you, and then that means they want you to do it. If not, and then don't get upset. Maybe it's because they're not ready for it, or maybe you're not ready for it yourself.
Are they still grinding the corn on Mama Patate?
Yeah.
That's for the traditional use.
Yeah. We have a Franciscan friar from Cincinnati, Ohio, that was adopted by my family, and so when we have Indian ceremonies or anything of that sort, we always invite him in and to participate. And usually the medicine people are very receptive to that, because we'll explain to them that he's also part of our family. In fact, I think my family has gotten so used to him being around us that even my niece and nephews don't even see him as a different person. And because my niece came back one day from school, and they're trying to teach them the Navajo language along with English, because Navajo is not a written language. Well, let me take that back. It is a written language, but it doesn't do me or anybody any good because we can't read and write. I can speak it, but I can't read and write. So it's real difficult for me to write my own language or even read it. But now they're starting at a young age where they're teaching them. But anyway, so she learned this one word, and we speak to her Navajo. But she's only like about 6 years old. And she came back and she asked her mother, she says, "Mommy," she says, "we learned this new word at school." And she said, what word is that? She says, "Balagana." And Balagana is a word for a white person in my language. And so she says, "What does it mean?" So my sister said she thought about it for a few minutes. She says, "Oh, okay." She said, "I'll use this as an example to let her know what the word Balagana means." And so she said, "Do you know Uncle George?" His name is George, but everybody calls him Uncle George. She says, yeah. Well, he says, Uncle George is a Vilagana. And my sister said, her little daughter looked at her real puzzling and said, Mom, he says, Uncle George is not Vilagana, he's a Navajo. I think that's a little cute story. So anyway, so spiritual growth is what everybody is looking for. And one example is going up the mountain. For me as a Navajo person, like I said, at the beginning of the base of the mountain, there's a little prayer. You get your corn pollen out, you drop it gently on the ground, and you say a prayer for yourself, and you say a prayer for a safe journey up the mountain. And for me, because I was brought up with both the Catholic tradition and the Navajo tradition, I see a lot of similarities for myself. And if you go back into Scripture, the mountains had a lot of meaning for the people in the Old Testament. You know, there was, when you get to the top of the mountain, that's where God lived, and there was the burning bush and all these other things. And I look at my own culture, and the mountains have a lot of significance for us. It's a journey of faith to the top of the mountain. At the top of the mountain, and when you reach the top of the mountain, that's the significance behind is that you have reached a different height of spirituality. And because it's an upward motion, you're striving for an enlightenment. So, and then you start your journey up the mountain, and then when you get to the top of the mountain, before you can even do any hiking or sightseeing or anything of that recreational sort, you immediately find an isolated place, and it's real difficult for us when we go up to the top of San Diego Mountain to find a place that's isolated because there's people all over the place. For the Navajo people, when you pray, you should almost to the point where you hide it. In other words, don't show it off. And that's what I was always told. When you pray, do it very discreetly, for not even other people would see you pray. And I think that's very much part of our scripture too. I remember Jesus telling, you know, if you want to pray, go to a room, lock your door, and pray privately. And so that's where I made that connection there again for myself. And so, like I said, it's so difficult for us to find a private place when we get up to the mountains. And so we just do it where we can find at least some private places. And usually my mother is one that has her corn pollen. And you would approach a spruce tree. The spruce tree for us has a lot of significance too, because it's growing out of the ground, which represents our Mother Earth, and it's going up in an upward position toward the heavens. That is to remind us that it's what our spiritual life is supposed to be about. So you're supposed to come from the ground and then go out toward the heaven. And then you drop this piece of corn pollen down at the base of the blue spruce where it meets the ground. After you do that, you grab the leaves of the blue trees with your right hand, not with your left, but with your right hand, because for us that represents the right way. It's the order in life. And then everybody, one person will be designated to pray. And sometimes that prayer goes on for a long, long time. And so you hold on to this, and the significance of holding on to the blue trees is that we're going to hold on to each other no matter what happens in life. We're going to care for each other. We're going to love each other. And the journey toward this path of spirituality is not only an individual job, but it involves the whole community. The community needs to go in an upward position. If you're going to do it by yourself, you can't survive. You need other people to help you and to help each other. And so that's the meaning behind that, is holding on to the spruce tree. And it also represents that all life around us, in some way, is also part of this to help us. The mountains is there to remind us that we need to be constantly on a journey. And as you all know, to hike up the mountain is a lot of work. And so that is also to remind us that, you know, if we want to work on our spiritual life, it's not an easy journey. It's a hard journey. Sometimes you have to sit down and take a little rest. And that's what it's all about. And sometimes you get tired. Sometimes it's raining. Sometimes there's sunshine. You have good days and your bad days. And so there's a lot of meanings going up the mountains. But of course today you can drive up there. So you lose some of that, the whole meaning. But the whole idea is there, you know, you still need to crawl up the mountain, whether you're walking or you're driving. And sometimes driving is a long time because it's very winding. And that for us again represents that spiritual life sometimes is not exactly a straight, narrow road. Sometimes it's a windy road. And for the Navajo person, that's not so much a discouragement. We always say sometimes maybe you need to become astray in order to experience what you really need in life. And so to astray from the main road sometimes is not really a bad experience or even a negative thing, but to remind us that we do need to get back on that good road.
Brother, I thought you were saying spruce tree, and I know you're not. What kind of tree?
It's a blue spruce tree.
A blue spruce?
Always
Yeah.
blue, not the five, not the other fives, Ponderosa or...
No, this will be usually a spruce tree, yeah. And so the environment has a lot to do with how we approach spirituality. Because for the Navajo people, our senses, I think, is real key to our surrounding. And we use our touch, what we see, what we hear, and what we taste. All that is tied in with our spirituality. And I think as Christian people, I think we need to get back in touch with that ourselves too. Sometimes we get too intellectual, and so we lose touch with our surroundings, and everything just becomes a real petty thing. And I'm not saying that's wrong, but it just becomes lopsided. I think it becomes a lopsided spirituality. But if we can use all the other five senses in our spirituality and try to balance all those five out in our life, and I think then you become a fairly balanced spiritual person. And so for myself as a Navajo Franciscan, I try to bring some of that into my own spirituality as a Franciscan friar. And sometimes that's difficult because for myself, I live with at least like 6 other Franciscan brothers, and for me to incorporate some other ways of praying sometimes becomes real difficult for the other friars to accept, because for them it was only this way and it can't be that way. And so there's a lot of pulling back and forth between my spirituality and their spirituality. But I don't see that as a discouragement, because I think I also can also teach them something, and they in return can also teach me something too. So it's not only I'm only the teacher and they're the students, but sometimes I'm the student, they're the teachers too. And so we need to be open to all types of spirituality. And for myself personally, I was just telling Bill here as we were driving over that, for me, besides being a Franciscan and also being a Navajo person, I'm always interested in learning other people's spirituality, regardless whether you believe in it, or you can even accept it, or whatever reason that we don't want to even just be open to the idea of learning something from a different spirituality. Because the way I look at spirituality, with all these religions on the world, I think every religion has some truth and it has some holiness. And we can learn something from them. And if we decide to accept that spirituality, make it part of our life, if it can make you grow in a very good way, and then I think you should take advantage of it and use it. And if you feel that it's not going to benefit you, or it's not going to help you grow spiritually, and then you don't have to accept it, and you don't have to make it part of your life.
It sounds like you're saying we need to slow down and honor Christ in everything.
Right.
No matter whether we want to use the corn poem or the rosary or prayer or whatever, as long as we slow down and recognize Christ
Right.
in everything we do.
And that's what I meant. I think there's a lot of, because of, we're such in a fast-paced world that I think we really have lost the whole sense of sacredness. You know, the sacredness of ourselves, the sacredness of other people, even our own family. We get so involved in time, you know. We have to be there by this time, and this is what I need to do. I need to finish it by this time, and as soon as I finish, I have to run over to the other side because I have to be over there. And then when I finish there, I have to run home, I have to do this, I have to do that. And it just even for friars, we get trapped with that too, ourselves. So we're not exempt from from the hustle and bustles of the world, because it's real easy to fall into that trap. And that's why I feel that people are looking for something to balance their other side of the life where there's this big rush. And we need to slow down, and we need to appreciate our surroundings. Get up middle of the night and go outside and look at the stars if you can see it. It's probably a little difficult here in Santa Fe. But where I come from, I mean, you see stars all over the place. Yeah. And there's, okay. And there's dirt, and there's the coyotes in the back of my mom's hill, and all kinds of stuff. And so for me, that's a constant reminder that we're not above God's creation, but we're a part of God's creation. And I think when God said, you shall have dominion over all other creatures, I think sometimes we take that to mean that we should control it and exploit it and destroy it and use it up, and then find something else after we use that up. I don't think that's exactly what God meant. I think what he meant was, respect it and use it properly and enjoy it. Because once something's gone and destroyed, you can't bring it back. This is like a human life, I think even for ourselves, we take ourselves for granted. That if you don't see the person that you love, you're going to make the assumption, well, they'll be here tomorrow. But there's no really guarantee that they'll be here tomorrow. Anything could happen between the last time you see and the next time you see them. And so for myself personally, part of my spiritual journey is that I'm really starting to appreciate everything in life. Not only my family, but also other people that I meet, my environment. Every morning, for me, it's a brand new day. God has given me another chance for me to be a better person, to help myself. I'm a firm believer that if we are going to help our brothers and sisters on their spiritual journey, we also need to help ourselves first. Because if I'm not in a state of healthiness, and then I can't help another brother or sister that really needs my help, I need to be at least well in order to hold them up and to love them and to care for them and just to be available to them. If I'm not in that place, and then I really have no business telling other people how they should live their spiritual life. And so, so for me, that's what spirituality is all about. And like I said from the beginning, I see myself as having two spirituality: the Navajo spirituality, the Catholic spirituality. And for me, it works. It has values. It has something that I need. Sometimes church, I feel, doesn't give me what I need to help me grow as a spiritual person. And so I turn to my Navajo way, and that there's usually something there that's available for me to use, and that will help me, that will make me grow as a stronger person. And sometimes there's nothing in my Navajo way that will help me, so then I go and turn toward the church, and there's something that I can use too. So for me, the church and my Navajo way is something that are interdependent on each other. They're woven together like this. And if you have those two, and then you have a very strong spiritual life. I don't know how long my time is. Maybe I'll take some questions now.
I'm curious to know about your youth. Do they turn away from the Indian spirituality at a certain age, like teenage or something? Our youth seems to reject what their parents want them to do. They don't want to go to church anymore. Do you have that?
Yeah, I think that's something that just goes across culture. When you're very young, I think, and we all were very young once.
Yes.
And I think if you look back and reflect on your own life, there's probably a time where you did rebel against something. And if it wasn't what the young children are dealing with today, it was probably something that we all rebel against. And the Navajo people are also experiencing the same type of turmoil that the rest of the American people in the United States are experiencing. We're at a point where our spirituality is really not important to the young people, and so they're not learning some of the ways of my people, and we find it very distressing, because we feel that it is very important that our people should know at least something about their culture. Getting back to the identity. I think a lot of times the young people really get into a lot of troubles because they don't have no identity. They have really no roots to say, this is who I am, and they're kind of lost. And so the only way that they feel accepted, or they find something, or a sense of belonging, is they join gangs. And that becomes their family, and that becomes their new identity. And it's a different type of family.
Well, are the parents still teaching them to get up early in the morning and get their pouch and pray?
No, and I think a lot has to do with the introduction of modernism in our reservation. We don't have that space like we used to have a long time ago. There's a lot of progress going on, and so I think sometimes progress does destroy certain things. So I don't know a lot of family that gets their children up real early in the morning and to pray, all that kind of stuff. So even some of that is being lost too.
I know in our culture, we used to get the children up early and go to Mass early. On a holy day of obligation, if you had to go to public school and it wasn't a holiday for you, you got to Mass by getting up extra early and going to church first. And that was very important. And now it doesn't seem to be happening to the young people. They just want to go to school, and they miss Mass that day because they don't think it's that important.
Are there any real basic differences between the Navajo and the Hopi spiritualities?
Yes. Yeah, there's a lot of difference between the spirituality, but I also find there's a lot of commonality between the two also, even at the same time. Well, just like our the Catholic Church and the church down the street, if it's a Protestant Assembly of God or a Methodist or whatever, it's the same type of thing. There's maybe the way we pray and the things that we use to pray may be different, but if you put all that to the side and look down at the real essence of it, there's that common ground. Yes.
I find it not known. I'm talking about Pueblo Indian now because I've lived here since '51, They were maybe 2 to 3 years old when I knew them real well. And then there was a period in their life when they completely went away and to Vietnam and all this. But I have found out now they're coming back. And they're very spiritual, both in the Christian and in the Indian tradition. And I found that with lots of my Indian young people, the parents by now maybe may not be alive, but they are coming home again. Have you noticed that?
And I think that's that whole sense of, getting back to finding your identity and finding a place of sacredness. Jeff?
So, I had a comment. So you would say then that it's more important for us as part of humanity to look for the commonalities as opposed to things that are not common, because in essence we all do come from that same spirit.
Right.
No matter what different practices we may have, at the root of that is the Spirit of God.
Right. And even, and I think, having differences is not bad, because that makes life interesting, I think.
Diversity.
It makes life interesting. And then if we were all the same, and I think life would be kind of boring. And I think that's where we need to appreciate our differences, because you have something that that you can offer to this world, to the church, and make it a part of the church, and bring all that gifts in, and really, and I think that's where it really enriches the church. I know that. So we all need to be part of this bigger church, where we can make this a very a rich treasure, and that's where our culture comes in. A lot of times, I think we start saying, well, your culture is not good, but mine is better. Well, we can't do that, but we can allow this to happen, and that's where we start looking at all the differences, and then we get into one big fight. And the whole purpose of being united is now we're all separate people. And for myself, like I said, I'm as a Franciscan person, I get exposed to all types of spirituality. I've been to Mormon churches, Assembly of God, Pentecostals, Jehovah's Witnesses, and stuff like that. And I've been to a Baptist church, and I get invited to those things. And if I can make it, I'll go and just be part of that group. And when I usually leave from there, I know something about that particular church. Usually what I went in with is a lot of negative things, you hear them say, well, they're like this or they're like that. But when you actually do meet them, they're actually really very nice people. And there's a few in that crowd that does fit that image of what you went in. But the majority of people are actually very nice people.
But what you do when they're nice people, which I've experienced, that can't go along with what they preach, it bothers me a lot.
Yeah.
In a very conservative,
Yeah.
What you do, they come to grips with that, even if they're nice people.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's not a question of them telling that they're wrong. Maybe they are wrong.
No, I don't.
But,
I just don't go back.
Yeah, because of that, I
That's
feel that.
their way.
But that's their way. Yeah, that's their way to God, and and so who are
Well,
we
when
to
they
judge and
preach
say?
against other things, I don't think that's the way to God. I'm sorry. When they're homophobic and all that stuff, I'm sorry. I kind of think that's the way to God, even if it's their way.
I thought you meant churches.
I'm talking about churches and preachers. I am.
If you rephrase that, you said it's not your way, or you don't identify it as your way, would that be acceptable to you?
I don't think it's Christian.
But if you said it based on your appreciation of how you understand your way, your path, and you said that's not my way.
Oh, well, I don't go into that.
But there's a big distinction there, because in saying that is not the way to God, that's performing a judgment.
Well, I don't judge, I just don't, go back. I judge within me, but I don't fund a group of people.
So culture, spirituality, and we just have an example here. It is difficult to bring everybody's culture together and make it a part of as a place where we're united and where we're one in the body of Christ. And so it is difficult. So I think it's, this is a challenge for every one of us. Even for myself as a Franciscan, and then as a Navajo person, I have my spirituality that I brought with me to the church, and try to incorporate that. Sometimes doesn't work the way I want it to work, but I don't get discouraged because I just feel that the people that I live with are not ready for this. And so why get angry and why get upset? I'm not helping the situation. And so I usually just put it to the side, and then when I feel that it's time for me to use it, I'll bring it back out and then present it again. And that's the Navajo way of doing things. A lot of times when you live in a community, we all come from different backgrounds. We have our own ideas, and we all have our ideas about the world, the church, and how it should be, about God, and all this kind of stuff, and something. All those things get in the way. And for me, I usually don't say a whole lot. I just kind of just sit back and just observe, and just kind of say, well, this is what's going on. And I don't say anything. So usually the brothers I live with, they say, how come you didn't say anything? So I usually say, oh, I said, I'm just taking it from the Navajo approach. I said, that is, you don't say anything. I said, for the sake of harmony, I said, sometimes you don't say anything. And I said, maybe through your eyes, that's not the right way of approaching conflict. But I said, it works in my culture for us, because I said, it really eliminates a lot of bad feelings and a lot of bad talks. And I said, it works for me. And I said, that's usually the way I approach a lot of conflict, is for the sake of harmony, just don't say anything.
Brother Maynard, could you say a few words just about what you plan to share with us tonight, and so if the people they have friends who couldn't come today, they can tell them, give them some idea of where we're going tonight.
I'm doing another presentation this evening at 7 p.m. I have a few slides that I would like to incorporate into my talk. And again, it'd be on culture, spirituality. And from my first talk, hopefully I can even make it better with the second one. And so if you're welcome to come back at 7 o'clock.
Are you going to join us this afternoon?
Yes.
Do we have time to get into the sound painting, the deep spirituality, and who is involved?
Well, I think that would be a whole different workshop all by itself.
Yeah. Maybe we could visit about this.
Yes.
And may I ask a specific one? And is the blue spruce part of your mythology? What is
Yes. Yeah.
that specific tree? There must have been some kind of
Right.
origin.
A lot of these things that I mentioned, like the mountains, the blue spruce, and other creations, like water, the rocks, and stuff like that. For the Navajo person, that has a lot of meaning. It's not just not a piece of rock, like the mountain. For us, the Navajo people and other Indian people I know, the mountain is a living being. It's something that breathes, something that feels. And the way I was taught was, my mother always says, they're just like us. They breathe, and they're hungry, and that's why we feed them. But at the same time, they're also there to help us too. And so that's why, the mountain is just not a piece of a mountain there to just to abuse it. It's there for us to use recreationally and also spiritually, because it's something that breathes, something that's alive. And the blue spruce tree is also something that's very much alive too. It's just not a tree. For us, it represents another being. Not like you and I, but it's a being. I mean, it's a living entity. It breathes, and it thinks, and it feels, and it hurts. And And so that there's a lot of respect attached to that. And then also, the reason why they have a lot of meaning is because you need to go back into our creation stories, which for Christian people would be like the Old Testament. You know, the reason why we do these things is because our ancestors did all these things in the back, way so many generations back. And in the Navajo, it's the same thing. You know, we say, well, we do this because our ancestors did it this way. And so again, I plug myself into the church and I say, well, you know, the old people, our ancestors in the Old Testament did things this way. So that's why we do it this way today. Because they did it before us and we do it today. And so because the rocks and all these other creations were involved in the making up of this world, they all have their place, and they're there to remind us of what has happened a long time ago and what is happening today. They're here for us to go on this spiritual path to make us a better people.
And the ceremonial pipe, do they use that in the Christian celebrations, or is that separate?
They use it.
No, I meant like when you're, like with the mass or something separate, or is it just have its own celebrations and then the mass or something like that separate, or have they ever brought it together?
Well, they brought them together.
I love the rocks being the grandfathers. I remember when I was taught that at the ceremony, which I was allowed to be in, and that has to be ever since. And I was thinking, if you, I'm sure you're familiar with Ty Abishana, and don't you feel that he had great feelings for the natural things much more than other writings? And maybe that's why I like him so much, I don't know.
Yes.
Yeah.
So when we leave from here, try to see the world in a different perspective. Try to enjoy what is around you. We just take a lot of those things for granted. You know, they're going to be here tomorrow. They might not be here tomorrow. And I think God put them here so to let us know that His presence is also in those things too. To remind us that, you know, God is here with us.
When we go, we